afternoon, and welcome to the 5th Annual Summit for the Kansas Summit on Agricultural Growth. Thank you for gathering today with us to discuss how we together can grow the agriculture industry in our state. This event has traditionally been a time when we've been able to bring the state agencies, industry sectors together in one place with one goal, growing Kansas agriculture. While we aren't all in one place this summer, we are still focused on that one goal, and we are excited about the opportunities that a virtual summit is bringing to the experience. I'm confident that we will be able to work together in this virtual environment to outline some specific action items and to move the industry forward. In these challenging times, the role agriculture plays as Kansas's largest industry and economic driver is even more critical. We continue to be focused on economic growth for the state, which we know is dependent on growth in the agriculture sector. Strategic industry growth requires communication, coordination, and collaboration. Thank you again for taking your time today to join us and to be part of this effort and participating in the equine sector. I will now turn the webinar over to our sector leader, Janelle.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Olson. I'm Janelle Dobbins with the Kansas Department of Agriculture Division of Marketing. We're so glad you've chosen to spend time with us today. But I have a couple of housekeeping items I just want to start the session with. One, all participant microphones will be muted. Also, the bio of the presenters will be entered into the chat box, so you can view all of those and read more about that. Also, we'll have it that if you want to submit questions throughout the whole online sector discussion, you can do that in the Q&A button or on the chat button. And we'll be asking our presenters after each of the sessions any of the questions you had. Also, those written questions and comments will be monitored by KDA representatives to make sure we get them all covered. And if somehow we run out of time before the end of the sector, we will email answers on any of those to everyone listening in today. And also, when you ask a question, please include your name, city, and organization if possible. And also, this webinar is going to be recorded and will be posted online, so you can watch it again later or feel free to pass it along to anyone else who you think might find it interesting. So the vision of our agency is to provide an ideal environment for long-term sustainable agricultural prosperity and statewide economic growth. Our summit sector today, they provide platforms to entertain the opportunities and barriers to agricultural industry growth for our state. So for the next hour and a half, we are going to be focusing on the Kansas equine sector. Each year, we review opportunities for growth in the equine sector and challenges standing in the way of growth. We then prioritize what is most pressing to work at and review what successes have been achieved to date. And then, following reflection, we will reorganize those priorities for action in the following year. Occasionally, we see big swings in what our focus of action should be, and at other times, we see just a little shift in priorities. You should have received a copy of the 2019 Outcomes and Action Items ahead of the summit session. It's the document titled 2020 Equine Sector. But the slide that you should be seeing now is the summary of pages 5 and 6, the action items we will review in this session today. You'll note that coming out of the 2019 Equine Sector session, high priority was placed on obtaining an economic impact study for the horse industry, as well as support for trail maintenance, promotion and growth of trail riding with new trail development, and amenity improvements. So now we're going to put up a poll, so just take a quick minute to complete this poll by picking your top 3 most important items to you for the equine sector. And I'll give you all just about a minute to take the poll. I'll give you about 20 more seconds to answer on that poll. Okay, it's looking like we have two different items that tied for the most important. We have obtain an equine survey for assessing economic impact and defining horses as livestock for all state departments to recognize. And then it looks about, actually we have a tie for the number 3 spot too, providing trail support and appointing a Kansas equine extension specialist. So, oh, and sorry, there was another part on the poll here too. We actually had having an equine expo infrastructure would actually be our number 2, coming in at 64%. So thanks everybody for doing those polls for us. And then now I'm actually going to turn it over to Justine, who's going to start introducing and speaking with our speakers today.
Helps if I'm not on mute, then you can actually hear me now. My apologies. I'm Justine Staton, Executive Director of the Kansas Horse Council, and today we welcome some incredible guest speakers who will share their successes that we can use as a guide for our strategic growth as we move forward. First up, Mr. Kerry Smith, founder of Big Ass Fans, and feel free to type him some questions while he's speaking. Most anyone who's been into commercial barns or arenas is familiar with this product, Big Ass Fans. Kerry is graciously sharing his time to bring us some sage information to chew on. Good afternoon, Kerry, and thank you for being with us today.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
You bet. When you started Big Ass Fans in 1999, it was called something else. How did you come to name your product Big Ass Fans? Was it the HVLS? Well, I was remembering some HVLS I'd heard.
No, it was. You're right. I'm kidding around. I apologize. We called it HVLS Fan Company, High Volume, Low Speed Fan Company, which at the time to us, because we're more or less an engineering firm, it made a lot of sense. And we used that name for a couple of years, but inevitably when people called us on the telephone and we answered HVLS Fans, there was a pause, and they'd say, "Are you those guys making those big ass fans?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess we were," and it took us a little while. We're not the sharpest knives in the drawer, but we decided to rename the company, and I think that was a good move.
And that's when you became Chief Big Ass.
Well, not that day, but it certainly happened not long afterwards. I mean, I couldn't think of anything more evocative than that. So it was funny because I would go. I talked to a lot of people in a lot of forums, and I think the thing they wanted, it seemed that they wanted to do was introduce the Chief Big Ass. They got a big kick out of that. So
I love it.
So it worked, and I think it indicates that, or it indicated that I wasn't that big a deal. I mean, it seemed about right to me.
Well, very good. So how important then, in looking at that, do you think a name or a slogan or a motto even in marketing is for a business?
Oh, I think it's exceptionally important. People imagine with the fan company that was the major, that we would not have been as successful without the name change. I don't know if that's, well, it probably is something to be said for that, but we were focused more than anything else on engineering and product quality and the customer experience. It was, I don't know, it was I think it was indicative, the name was indicative more of the way we looked at ourselves and just life in general, because we're sort of contrarian, and so we're not necessarily self-deprecating, but I don't know. It's better to on the spectrum. It's better to be on that side of the spectrum than the other, I think.
All right. Well, Big Ass Fans appeared in Inc. 5000's list of fastest growing companies 11 times from 2007 to 2017, and you even survived and grew through the 2008 economic recession. And And then in 2017, you sold your company for $500 million, which is very impressive. What was your secret to surviving and actually growing when there was otherwise somewhat of a bleak outlook across the nation?
Well, I think for one thing, you always have to be optimistic. I don't think that you can run any sort of business without being an optimist. I don't think it would work otherwise. The other thing was that because we sold in the main directly to our customers. I mean, we talk to our customers all the time. We didn't really use sales channels that involve third parties. And so we had a pretty good idea that we were going to be in a jam recession-wise going into the second quarter of 2008. At that time, I mean, it's a very scary thing because the only other recessions I'd been through, the companies in which I was involved were not large enough to actually feel any effects from a recession. And we realized that we were going into it, and consequently, we started looking for other options in terms of, I mean, growing top line. I'm really not too much of a bottom line type of guy. So I told everybody at the time that times are getting tough. This is the people that were working with me at the company. At the time we had, I don't know, maybe 100, 150 people. But I wasn't going to lay anybody off, so they shouldn't be worrying about that. But we were going to have to buckle down. And we actually, though our revenues dropped 9% during the recession, we still made money. We didn't make much money, but we made some money, enough money so that I could pay the people that worked with me, all of the people, bonus. Our bonuses typically were amounted to 1 month's salary, more or less, for everybody in the company. During that time, I was able to pay people $500, which is nothing. And I apologized to everybody. And they told me, "Oh, don't worry about that, Carrie. It's a bigger deal that we've kept going." But I think that from the time that the recession ended, so 2009 to 2017, we grew from 35 million to 265 million. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that we didn't lay people off, that we maintained an esprit de corps, and we were continually looking for opportunities while others in our I won't say competitors, but generally competitors were looking the other way and slowing down. We spent our time developing new products and so on. So I think that, again, and maybe it's just stupidity, but I think that it's foolish in times like these not to have your head up and not to be looking for new and different things and different approaches. It pays off in the long run. At least that's my experience.
Wow. Well, just to review, looking back over 2008, that was definitely a downturn in the equine industry in Kansas. We saw racetrack closures. We saw the end of equine processing outlets. And some would say we've never fully recovered from that shrinkage when we lost several breeding farms and racing stables, and they moved out of the state. That was a time that was coupled with internet sales taking away from local sales. And kind of on some level, 2020 has been somewhat of that same economic recession that we've felt with the COVID. And now we've got equine VSB that's causing many of our lessons facilities to close and our equine events to cancel and competitions to cancel. So it creates somewhat of a trickle down to our service providers, our farriers, our retailers, and even we see that in the hospitality industry worldwide right now with the COVID. What encouraging words can you provide for that optimism, to encourage optimism for our equine industry in Kansas?
No, I agree. I'm afraid you're breaking up, or
Oh,
I don't know if it's on my side or your side, but
I'll try it
so if
again.
you
So,
ask any question other than,
um, do you have any words of encouragement that you could provide to us to foster some optimism for the equine industry, to muddle through, to keep our chin up, so to speak?
I'm really sorry. I cannot, we are breaking up. So could you ask your question again? I apologize.
Sure, sure. And I can always type it if need be. Do you have any encouraging words to foster some optimism that we in the equine industry can kind of lean on in this economic recession that we're feeling?
I don't know. I think it's very interesting. Yeah, I think it's very interesting that the economy has not stalled in the fashion that I would have expected it to stall. And I think part of that is because of the provision of some of the for the unemployment on the unemployment side. I don't, these sorts of things, it seems to me, don't, you can't do anything about it other than to look for opportunities. I always think about it in terms of if you're in the middle of a car crash. I mean, there's a couple of approaches you can take. One of them is to close your eyes and hope for the best. And the other one is keep your eyes open and look for an opportunity to steer away from the problem. And I think that the latter is the only approach you can take. I don't understand any other approach. And so I read a lot of news. I get a lot of newsletters and I read a lot of news these days. And I think that it's very easy. And maybe it's, I don't know that it's self-fulfilling, but it's very easy to be down in the mouth about these times. I just don't, I just, there's no point to it. There really is no point to it. You have to be an optimist. And I think that it'll be interesting to see what this looks like several years down the pike. But I think within a year, you'll begin to wonder why in the world we were so fuzzed about this. I really do.
Well, looks like we've got some questions in the question box, so I'm going to volley some of those to you. We have
Sure.
Chris asking, what is unorthodox ventures? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, what we do is we invest in small businesses for the most part, and the sorts of businesses we look at are normally businesses that are manufacturing a hard product. I mean, a physical product. So we're not so interested well, we're not interested at all in software, as a matter of fact. And so I think we go at it a bit differently than most what you would call venture capitalists. We're more interested in working with the entrepreneurs and helping them grow their business. It's amazing to me how little a lot of people, I mean, there's a lot of smart people out there with a lot of really good ideas, but they know very little about business or the various aspects of business. And in the educational system, there's very little that is done to help people actually plot a path starting a business. And so what we do is our group is made up of a lot of people from the fan company, engineers, people that were developed sales channels, marketing people, um, quality assurance people, statisticians, and so forth. And so we work with small businesses to help them grow. And I normally tell the people we work with, like, you know, there's a lot of money out there right now being thrown at businesses. And the only thing we can provide other than that is the compression of the time that it takes these people to actually get up and get going and be successful because we've done it. And So we take a little bit of different approach.
Okay. We have a couple extra other questions in here. Cindy's asking, where is Big Ass Fans manufactured out of, and are they looking to expand operations in other communities here in Kansas? Maybe she doesn't know that you've sold that company.
Well, I tell you, it's we received inquiries all the time for that. It's as long as they keep the roadways maintained, I don't know that that's actually going to be necessary, because it was easy enough for us to get product from all over. All of our product was manufactured in the States. We made a big deal out of that. But we didn't. Multiple manufacturing facilities is very difficult, very, very difficult to maintain any sort of cogent culture and quality control. So I don't think they're interested in that.
Okay. And
I'm sure
Gabby's
they appreciate the offer.
Gabby's asking, what type of advertising do you feel is most effective? Facebook, social media types, or other traditional types like print, radio, or TV?
Well, I'm sort of contrarian as relates that, because there are certain things that work very well on Facebook, but unfortunately, Facebook is incredibly overvalued in terms, and is other social media in terms of its effectiveness. We did an experiment with a fan company where we were spending at one time over $10 million a year on social media. And I got fed up with it because they had a very difficult time showing me the benefits, and we simply stopped everything. And amazingly enough, nothing happened. And so we went from spending 10 million to not spending 10 million. Actually, it was more than 10 million, but I'm too embarrassed to tell you what it was. And it made very little difference. I think that we have a lot of people coming to us and they imagine that because they read about it, because they imagine. It's amazing the effectiveness of the marketing of Facebook and social media, because it's not an answer at all. I feel much more comfortable, and we spent, and still do, spent a lot of time and effort on what would be referred to as PR, or public relations. And what I mean by that, to me, that's a much more effective form of marketing, which is that we told stories. I mean, we actually explained what we did, why we did it, how we did it, why it was important, why it's important to you and or your industry. And that takes a lot of effort. That probably is what separates a successful company and successful marketing operation from others. People like to read. I mean, the first article the first thing we ever did in terms of advertising for the fan company was explain laminar airflow, which I know sounds pretty, esoteric, but it was interesting. And people, I don't know, I think it's very foolish to solutions in relatively simple terms to your customers.
Very
I hope that
interesting.
dissuaded somebody from jumping on Facebook and spending a lot of money.
So really getting out there, talking to your people that would be your potential buyers or your market is really key communications with them. Here's a question. As a contrarian, do you seek to do something unique or different from what other businesses are doing?
Of course, all the time. I mean, again, we don't focus on a specific industry. We do
Can't hear you. Are
the
we
people
frozen?
that I work with. I'm not frozen. Are you?
There we go. Yeah, I couldn't hear
we
you for a minute.
we do an awful lot of diligence, a lot of legwork determining
I think we somehow muted you there, Carrie. There, looks like maybe.
Oh, hey, so we kind of been losing Carrie there a little bit, so we're going to move any of his questions to the end. And we're actually going to move on to our next speaker, Sue Stringer, who's the manager of the Scenic Byways and Agritourism for the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism, is going to give us a quick welcome and update.
Good
I
afternoon.
apologize.
No problem. Good afternoon, everybody. I am here to tell you a little bit about the program that I manage. If you have not heard about Kansas Agritourism and the layer of limited liability protection that being a registered agritourism business can provide for you, I'm here to tell you about it. So I'm just going to run through some real quick bullet points that I have written up. The Kansas Agritourism Promotion Act passed back in 2004 by the Kansas legislature. And as I said, if you are a registered agritourism business, you can receive a layer of limited liability protection with registration and the posting of an agritourism warning sign. Registration is through the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism. It's kind of on the tourism side of the website. So you can go to www.kansasagritourism.com and registration is free. We have a form there for you to fill out. And in that form, you would put all of the things that activities that people do on your farm. So if you have horses and you offer trail rides, those are things that you want to list. If in your horse barn, you also have birthday parties or host pony rides, things like that, those are things you want to list. If you have a jumping pad or jumping pillow for some of those birthday parties, you want to be sure to list everything that people can enjoy and experience when they come onto your farm. That's what agritourism is about. It is the experience that visitors can have when they come onto your property. The registration certificates are good for 5 years from the point of registration. And as I said, again, it is a layer of limited liability protection by Kansas law. And you have to have a valid certificate and have the agritourism warning sign posted in full view for your guests to see when they enter your property. The warning sign has specifications that are within the statute that you have to follow. And the Kansas statutes that cover this law are Kansas statutes 32-1430 through 32-1438. You can look those up on the Kansas legislative website. The warning sign has to be, the letters have to be a minimum of 1 inch high and printed in black ink. You want to make sure, and I'm sure that Justine, when she gets a call for agritourism warning sign, she knows the difference, but a lot of folks initially will get the equine warning sign. And I know that those are important for all you guys with horses, but it doesn't cover the agritourism law. So make sure you get the agritourism warning sign. Tell Justine's office when you call. And I say that because they are the point of contact to purchase the warning signs from. They are $40 each, and they're in the swag section on the Kansas Horse Council's website, or you can also buy them from Better Equine at Payola. It does not do you any good to have the signs posted if you are not registered as an agritourism business. So also with registration, you get a free listing on the travelks.com website. So you want your little elevator speech in there that says, hey, you'll enjoy our place. We have trails galore. You can bring your horse, or we provide horses, the safety training that goes along with it and all of that. And I usually will pull some pictures from your Facebook page or Instagram and put up so it looks nice and pretty on our website for you. I also maintain a Kansas Agritourism Facebook page where I promote the agritourism businesses across the state. And one of the other perks is that you'll receive updates from the Kansas tourism industry. You'll be an industry member and receive Travel Talk or Travel Talk Lite that will tell you about upcoming grants that our division offers, such as marketing grants or attraction development grants. And as agritourism businesses, both of those grants have been awarded to some of our agritourism businesses. So It's a program that's been around for a long time. I have a lot of people that have horses as a part of their business or it is their primary business. So I would just encourage you all, if you have questions, you can reach out to me. I am at sue.stringer@ks.gov, or Janelle, I don't know whether you guys provide our phone numbers or not, but my number is 296, and that would be 785-296-1847. So are there any questions?
Sue, it looks like we have a question. How can Kansas Horse Council members help in promoting agritourism in Kansas? Any ideas, thoughts?
If you are registered, I can help promote you, and you can let other people know that this is available. I mean, just word of mouth. The program's been around. I have around 415 or so registered businesses across the state, and I know that there's at least that many more. A lot of people say they never knew it was available. Again, it's been around, but just word of mouth. So those of you that are involved, tell your friends about it and share it and have it with me.
Great. Well, thank you. It seems like agritourism is an often overlooked additional or alternative revenue stream, and equine folks could certainly consider that with the vast array of opportunities out there. So
That's
thank you.
very true. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's turn our attention next to my counterpart, the Executive Director for North Carolina's Horse Council, Ms. Sue Gray, and she'll share with us uses of an economic impact report. Welcome, Sue. Are you there? Did we lose you?
All right, can you hear me now?
There we go.
Okay. Sorry about that, I forgot.
All right.
I'm honored to be with you again and learning a lot as I listen to everyone talk. Our council primarily is responsible for policies, laws, rules, and regulations. And today I wanted to talk about kind of the importance, real briefly, of the economic impact numbers and how I use those statistics and how important they are in regards to that issue. So next slide. Who's ever kind of moving that. Basically, we're a 501c5. We have a companion foundation, a 501c3. The C5 is important because that allows us to lobby. We do have two full-time staff people. We have 2 paid lobbyists on contract. We have a part-time independent contract trails consultant, and we are currently hiring a part-time social media consultant. So I was a little disappointed to hear that might not be the way to go. Maybe I should have gone with PR. So we might have to go back and take a look at that. Our revenue stream is important to us. It's multiple, but primarily we're funded through a feed assessment here in our state. It's renewable every 10 years. It is $4 a ton, 10 cents a 50-pound bag, and that's our primary function. Next slide, please. When I came to this job in 2006, they had an economic impact study that was done locally. In 2009, our legislature funded and our first real census and direct economic impact study, and that was done in 2009. In 2017, we piggybacked onto the American Horse Council's economic impact study, which allowed us to draw out states and actually gave us information on different sectors within our equine community. I will share that since I arrived in 2006, we have had major equine related education that can directly be brought back to these economic data. Next slide. The very first one I wanted to talk about was passed this year. It really was in our Farm Act of 2019, but we didn't, because of different issues between our legislature and our governor, didn't get passed until 2020, where we used the economic data to clarify equine activities as part of agritourism. And while we were there on the local and county level, many of our equine farms, the county or the cities were assessing them a special use permit to conduct an equine activity. And oftentimes that was a fairly high price when we were saying, well, agribusiness would be exempt from that. So we had to go back in and to re-clarify, and that was successful. I used general statistics on that. I wanted to kind of give you a flavor of what we use when we go to the legislature. We looked at just the sheer number of equine farms in our state, as well as the number of people engaged with that farming activity. We used the acreage, the amount of land in our state that was specifically set aside being used for equine, and then the overall economic impact of the industry as a whole, which was 3.44 billion. So it's a pretty large amount of dollars within our state. Next slide. The other this year and very current was we did lobby our governor to allow us to reopen our horse shows during phase 2 or as early as possible. We were able to secure bipartisan support in our legislature for that opening, utilizing our economic data. And what we did was pull out just the competition sector and letting them know that there were 8,000 jobs in our state tied to that it had an economic impact of $734 million, and that it added $423 million to the state's economy overall. And with that, then we included all of the public health and safety protocols that were needed, that we felt were needed in order for us to safely reopen. I can tell you that with that bipartisan support and that economic data, our governor allowed us to be considered a sporting event, and while technically under phase 2, we would not have opened. He allowed us to open based on those numbers and based on our public health protocols that we established. I can give you an update today. We've had major shows within the state where different representative states, and between 6 and 8 different states there, through contact tracing, we've had no incidences of positive COVID from those horse shows. So that was a critical use of our economic data. Next slide. In 2021, we've already prepared, getting ready for our long set general session to improve equine access to public land. We have initiated support for that. We, again, I think will have bipartisan support based on our recreation sector and our general data, which you can see on the screen, and the number of volunteers and the residents volunteering their time in horse-related activities. That data has driven a larger group of legislators to our cause. And so we're feeling fairly positive. This is legislation we've attempted in several different years, but it looks like we have a really good shot at it based on our numbers this year. Next slide, please. Just wanted to kind of give you a quick flavor. I know it's a horrible slide with a lot of information on it, but all of the legislation you see passed here, which went from private property rights to clarifying our present use value, to putting in a grazing fee to meet the dollar needs for the present use value taxation, to improving our liability law, to exempting equine barns and stables from building code so that they can more economically put up those stables and get those stables operating. Making sure we were included in bona fide farm language and clarifying that, and legislation for our equine therapy and rescues. That data was useful to us in being able to include them in bona fide farm language while they might not technically be a farm, and that allowed them to take advantage of some of the other equine laws. And the last one that we most passed in the last long session was a new abandonment law, and we did that with general statistics and general data. Not up here as we use this money for our specialty license plate, which we also have, some horse trailering laws, and we were able to lobby successfully based on our data for improvements in our Southeast Agricultural Center for a new horse arena and some stalls, and get some one-time state appropriated dollars for that based on economic impact numbers. So next slide. And I apologize, I know I'm kind of running this real fast for you to try to stay in our 5 minutes here. We really have, this is something I told Justine, I use almost every day, somewhere, somehow, to be able to improve the climate for our equine owners and businesses here in North Carolina. One of the things with the legislatures, they're always surprised by these numbers. And we've started a new thing within the last 2 years with this in inviting a legislature to each of our board meeting and giving them an opportunity to talk to our members and get to know us better and get to know really who we are. And the job potential and the potential for job growth is a major influencer for us. Can't stress enough how critical our Department of Agriculture is to us, and being part of agriculture and remaining part of agriculture is also a real critical tie for us. And we hope that we'll be increasingly considered in those numbers. And then the last thing is just keeping that data fresh. I had board members say, why do you want to do another economic impact study? And I said, because when you're looking at 2000 and prior to 2006, 2009, 2017, you need, you've got some older data. We came through a lot of different situations through that. So once we get that big major study done, we can do smaller pieces to add or to clarify or to verify the information that it is given to us. So I know I just ran through something that usually takes me an hour and a half. So I'm sorry, Justine, but I did want to get a chance to just cover the high spots for you on the economic impact.
Yeah, Sue, that's great information. Really appreciate all that. And I know it was in a hurry. We did have one question that was posed by Chris. She was kind of curious if your economic impact data is a true representation of all the horse owners, or is it just kind of a percent of the horse owners? How do you think your reach went?
It's both. And that's what I said about kind of mentioning and refreshing data. The first 2 studies that we did were census. We did a census data to look at the true numbers. The third study was percentages and looking at both direct and indirect economic impact so that we could get a better handle on that. So I hope that answered your question. So it's a little of both.
Well, and thank you for sharing how useful that information is, because you kind of touched on all of our action items. Things that we like to work on every year, and how you've utilized that. So really appreciate your time, Sue. Thank you.
Welcome. You're welcome.
All right. Well, next I'd like to introduce Dan Schulte-Hahn. He's a veteran, a cowboy, a backcountry horse patrolman, a venture business entrepreneur, and an all-around horse adventurist. And Dan, I have to tell you how much I love your biopic where you're on a horseback in a bar. Are you with us still? We need to unmute. I gotta unmute Dan. There we go. Are you there? I think we're muted again, Dan. He lives in the backwoods, the high country in Wyoming. So he was warning us that it might be a little bit in and out on reception today. So hopefully we'll get him here in a second. Are you with us, Dan? Did we lose him? Oh, there we go. Now we got to get your voice. We can't hear you. Oh. Are you there now? We see you. We just can't hear you yet, Dan.
How about now?
Yay!
Yeah,
There we
can you hear me?
go. Yes.
Looks like we got some bandwidth issues both on the video, this application here, and through the phone service. I think a lot of it has to do with the COVID situation where, people are doing a lot of this remote stuff. So I apologize. Well, thanks, Justine. I appreciate the intro there. And that picture, yes, you're right. That kind of represents my life. I'm a guy who likes adventure. I like doing interesting things with people I enjoy being with. And, that's why I'm happy to be a part of this group. Even though I live in Wyoming, this type of conversation interests me. You know, I've been an entrepreneur for a number of times, probably 14 different times. A lot of it was equine related. I've worked at board levels for different companies, and I also support what Kerry had to say from Big Ass Fans. He's very knowledgeable and has some experiences he brings to the table, especially when it comes to economics. You know, I was taking a look at Kansas and the economics of agritourism and doing as good a job as I could to find out what the numbers are like. And it's interesting how the internet has varying numbers, whether it's on the state of Kansas or if it's just on international or domestic numbers on tourism. But, you know, there's a lot of money there. And when I think of, you know, the definition of economic development, you know, you can look it up in Wikipedia and it talks about economic and social development, blah, 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 things like that. But really what it comes down to is having money coming in, especially more money coming in than going out. And when I think of Kansas, you know, in my experience in Kansas, when I met Justine, I was actually on a business venture, and I was taking a look at a television show and becoming involved in that. It's a show that promotes tourism and from a local to a state level. And so it really did pique my interest to do a little investigation and to join up with this group and talk. You know, when I think of the position that Kansas is in, you know, you're a part of the Western history, you're a part of the Western culture. When I think of Wyoming, Texas, Kansas, you know, those are very important states when it comes to, I think, economic development, tourism, agritourism. It seems like that's what you're faced with is how do you rise yourself above what they call the clutter in marketing? Everybody wants the tourism dollars. You know, there's a lot. There's 1.1 trillion of both domestic and international tourist dollars that come into this country. How do you get your piece of the pie? Well, I think a lot of it is you've got to elevate yourself above everybody else, or what they call the clutter. You know, it's interesting to me when I was doing some comparisons of the state I live in and the state of Kansas, and even though Wyoming, you know, promotes itself, they're called the cowboy state, and they really do a lot to support that whole equine type of feel. Kansas actually has a much stronger history than Wyoming does. Probably a stronger history, I think, especially when you think about the promotion through Hollywood, a much stronger position than Texas even. You know, and so when I was kind of thinking about what I would do if I were involved in the promotion of the equine industry, you know, I would really try to leverage off of that. And I would try to have, and I'm sure Kerry would attest to this, brand clarity. You have to be a state where it's clear as to who you are and why people should want to come and see you. And so when I look at, you know, kind of what I've helped out in Wyoming, whether it's that bucking horse, you know, on the license plates and on everywhere, whether you come into the state and you look at the state sign or you look at our license plates, you look at everything, it's always this cowboy thing. You know, and that was their goal, to create some kind of brand clarity. And I think with Kansas, you know, I think actually you're in a stronger position to do that than we are. And so, you know, I think about the economics, and I'm just going to share a few numbers with you as I've been sorting through I'll call it the internet, trying to figure out things. You know, Kansas right now, I think basically from tourism, it seems to me, if I've got my numbers right or close, that tourism satisfies about 4% of your total state budget. If you think about this and you think about competing for dollars, if you were to compete up against Texas and take some of that notoriety that they get from their rodeo, their history, their barbecue, that they promote, the culture and all that, you could actually, the amount of dollars that they have coming in for their tourist industry, that is, a lot of it is related to the agritourism, you would satisfy 150% of your state budget. That's how significant this can be. You know, and so when I think about where you're at, I can see a lot of potential in Kansas. It's probably, and I'm sure you've tapped into a lot of it, but I see a lot of remaining untapped potential there. And so I just would encourage you to really think about, the brand that you want to promote. And if the equine industry, which I think it is strong in Kansas, especially in history it is, and I think modern day, I mean, you've got everything it could take. You think about, here in Wyoming, we got a couple of forts. You've got scores of forts out there. When I think about the historic cities, you've got lots of them. The cattle, the cattle depots, I'll call them, and the famous legendary people like Sam Bass, Bill Doolin, all of that. And, so when I think of this, I would just say, really think about what this means to the state. It can be incredibly powerful. And I'll just summarize with this. I used to have a business in a small town, and we were promoting agritourism in that Western way. And it's amazing how people are so in tune with that, especially the international people. We get a lot of international. There's a lot of promoting internationally that goes on here in Wyoming. And there's a lot of people that just want to come to see what you have, especially if it ties into the Old West, especially if it ties into tourism and things like that. I do a lot with horses, and I was riding downtown in the Lander, Wyoming. And let me back up. I was driving downtown and I hit this intersection in my truck, and it was a four-way intersection. Four of us hit that intersection at the same time. We're just kind of all looking at each other like you normally do. Who's going to go first, type of thing. About 3-4 hours later, I was on my horse and I ride downtown, and I rode to that same intersection, and the same thing happened. There were 3 other people, including myself, at that intersection, and nobody was going to go. They wanted me to go first. That's how much a horse, I guess, has an effect on people. So I would really think about that when you're tying it into tourism, when you're tying it into your state brand, when you look at all the infrastructure you have. I think Kansas is in a really prime spot right now for really driving, I'll call it, economic revenue. And so, my hat's off to you. And if there's any way I can help, I'm here to help. And I'll call it good.
That is great. Let me see if there's any questions that popped up that I might have missed here. I don't see any just at the moment. So, Dan, thank you.
Okay.
That's an exciting, fresh perspective from the outside looking in. Oh, I guess I've missed some questions here. Hang on one second. Yes, here they are. What have you been into? Let's see, what are businesses you've had as an entrepreneur that may have been horse related?
Oh gosh, I've done anything from, as a young man, horse training to more recently, I had an online saddle and tack business. Oh, let's see. I had a famous historic saloon that was a Western. It was a wild place. It was on the Outlaw Trail, and I definitely promoted a lot of equine there. As soon as I got a hold of that business, I put in hitching rails up front. I had people riding horses into town. Just you name it. I've done it. Worked on a couple of reality shows that were Western related and horse related.
And another question: what does the backcountry patrolman do?
What I do is I volunteer a lot for charities and things, and so this is for northern Colorado. They've got some wilderness areas, and what I do is I patrol as a ranger when I have time on the weekends, and just mount up and make sure that keep the litter clean, help interface with the public to promote that brand that we have, and just basically trail maintenance, anything.
Great. Well, Dan, again, thank you for your time. Really appreciate your ideas, your perspective. It gives us all something encouraging to think about. Agritourism it's an opportunity. So thank you. At this time, we'll go ahead and pivot to some current events and the necessity of staying informed. So we'll introduce Dr. Andy Hawkins, KDA's Division of Animal Health. He's our Animal Health Assistant Commissioner. And Dr. Hawkins, what's new? Are you there?
I sure am. So Get this up and going here real quick. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'll go ahead and get started. We've got just a few minutes here, but kind of give you an update and kind of fill you in on the equine side of things from the Kansas Department of Ag Animal Health. I always like to start this slide just to show that equine does play a part in our economy, and it's something that we definitely appreciate and recognize. As you guys have probably all heard, right now in the state of Kansas, vesicular stomatitis is a big concern. We've been dealing with this incident since June 16th of 2020, and that was the first case that we've had diagnosed in the state of Kansas this year. And prior to that, there had only been one other case that we know in history, and that was late October last year, and that was in Sherman County up in the northwest part of the state. So we saw our first case on June 16th in Butler County. Since then, we'll talk a little bit more about our most recent numbers and whatnot. Just to kind of educate everybody a little bit about VSV, it is a viral disease. Primarily, it's only going to affect horses, but we also see it in cattle, sheep, goats, llamas, and alpacas, as well as pigs. Those lesions commonly are going to occur on places where flies tend to congregate. So around the face, lips, muzzle, up in the tips of the ear, coronary band, and the ventral midline as well. So we'll see that on the underside of them. And the incubation period, so the time from infection to detection is about 3 to 7 days. So just kind of give us a ballpark there. And then we can see viral shedding up to 10 days. And most generally, any positive case is placed under official quarantine for 14. And the reason behind that, just to give us a little bit of a buffer, if you will, outside of that viral shedding period. Treatment, we always kind of throw out supportive care, but basically that's just to make sure that your horse is able to eat, and it kind of depends on how severe those lesions are. If we've got a horse that sloughed the epithelium off of his tongue, that horse is going to be extremely painful and not wanting to eat, versus a horse that may have an ear lesion. So we can kind of treat those differently. But as far as supportive care goes, make sure they've got water. We can wet that food down if we need to, or hay, just so that they can eat a little easier and kind of lubricate it. We can manage those horses on anti-inflammatories. So that's, Banamine, Bute, Equiox, those types of anti-inflammatories, and then plus or minus antibiotics. And antibiotics are usually going to be prescribed for secondary bacterial infection. So if we've got a horse that's got a really bad wound, or that's not healing quite well, that's when we might look to do the antibiotics, and that's something in cooperation with your veterinarian. It's important to know that immunity is not protective. So what that means is when these horses develop antibodies, those antibodies do not protect them from reinfection. And I think at this point we've only got one premise that we've considered as being possibly reinfection. So for the most part, all the horses we've seen get better. And there's no vaccine. So if immunity is not protective, by definition, we don't really have the capabilities right now to get a protective vaccine either. When we test these horses, we're going to do two things. We're going to do swabs of the lesion. So we use a Dacron swab, which is a polyester swab, and we're going to swab the lesion. Then we're going to put it in a special media called TB media, and that kind of maintains the virus till it gets to the lab, and then we're going to look for DNA in that virus, and that's a horse that is actively shedding the virus, so within that 10-day period. And we're also going to pull a red top tube, so serum, and serum helps us on those horses that may be PCR negative. They could be positive to antibodies, meaning that they've had the disease. Incidentally enough, horses can actually have antibodies to VSV for 10 to 12 years. So if we have antibodies on that test, we don't know if they've been infected in Colorado or New Mexico or where. They could have been infected somewhere in their previous lifespan, knowing that we haven't had the disease here in Kansas. So then from that, what we'll do is called a complement fixation test, and then that can tell us whether or not it's been active infection or recent infection versus old infection. So just to kind of walk you through the diagnostics and why we do what we do. And then finally, it definitely is zoonotic, so we need to be careful about putting our hands in these horses' mouth or touching these lesions. Wear gloves, definitely wash your hands because it's I think if humans get it, it might be a mild stomatitis or kind of a sore mouth, very, very mild. Mainly what I hear is flu-like symptoms or just fatigue and fever. I'm going to show you guys a couple of these pictures here, and I do this just so we kind of follow the report, respond, recognize, report, and respond scenario. So it's very important that you guys notify us of any case that looks suspicious of VSV, because we've got a whole team that goes to work on this. And one of the biggest things with VSV is it can also infect cattle, and these lesions in cattle mimic foot and mouth disease. And that's why we take these very seriously, so we can get in, we can get tests on these animals and get confirmed what we've got going on. These are pretty classic lesions right here that we've seen. I'll tell you that the ear lesion is kind of a funny one in a lot of ways, because it's something that we don't always put a lot of emphasis on. But you think about fly strike and where those flies congregate. So we definitely have seen those in the ear. The coronary band. The horse in the bottom corner there, that's actually the index case in Kansas. So that was the first horse that we had confirmed positive. And then we've got 2 cow lesions there as well, one on the teat and then just the red nose. Here's just some more to kind of give you an idea where we've seen. A lot of these have been atypical. A lot of them have been asymmetrical, meaning just one side versus the other. We've seen these are pretty classic, all these. The tongue lesion there, that's about as aggressive as we've seen, and that's a pretty severe case. So the top one is that horse at initial presentation, and the bottom is that horse at 1 week. So you can kind of see where that's healing, and they do heal. By and large, we just got to write out this virus and treat them appropriately if need be. Here's just a few more, kind of the same idea. All these are from cases here in Kansas. So these are all cases that we've confirmed positive. So just to kind of put that on everybody's radar. So how did we get here? So if we look back to 2019, we called that kind of an incursion year. So that was in the serotype Indiana is what we're dealing with. In the past, it's always been New Jersey, but it's Indiana. It was kind of mainly over in the Colorado area, kind of up through the mountain region. I think they had about 800 cases. And then fast forward to this year. So interestingly enough, Colorado has had no cases, and Kansas is the one who's had all the hot spots, if you will. So this is kind of a weekly progression here. This initially started in South Central Kansas, and it's kind of a heat map. I know the map's a little bit different scale there, but you can kind of see as it starts dying down and it's moving east, and it kind of gives you an idea where we're at to June 16th. All right, so as of today, we have 180 total investigations, and I think that number is pushing 190. These slides are difficult to keep updated because this is changing constantly. Those are the 18 positive counties. We're definitely focusing more on the southeastern part of the state. We have 83 positive premises and 79 premises that are being managed as a suspect or pending lab results. So once VSV is confirmed in a county, as long as it's only in horses and not in cattle or ruminants, we can manage those as suspect premises and just put them under quarantine. And then just kind of seeing the impact there, over 480 head of horses and over 450 additional livestock, the majority of those being cattle. Occasionally we'll see some goats. It takes a lot of people behind the scenes to manage this. We've put this out on some of our flyers, and I put it here just to recognize that this is not a one-man show. We've got a small incident management team stood up to handle this, and how these calls come in to make sure that we're doing right and following up on everything, getting these through the labs, getting the owners notified, getting the referring vets notified. So it definitely is quite a process. And then as far as some outreach we've done, these are available on our website, and you guys can kind of see there's some signs here that they could print out and post at different fairs and shows. At this point, we've definitely not recommended canceling any fairs, shows, activities. I think that this just highlights that our goal is just increase biosecurity, do the right thing, be smart about our practices, and I think there's ways that we can go ahead and have those shows. A lot of the county fairs this year have implemented a kind of a policy where those horses, and in fact, all livestock are being inspected by veterinarians before they unload. And that's something that's kind of a county by county, case by case, but it is something that they've done to be able to go ahead and continue. We have some other documents and informational packets, if you will, available on our website under the animal health. And finally, I just put this up here to remind us that it is considered a reportable disease. So in the state of Kansas, these are the reportable diseases for equine, and in fact, all animals that are affected, and pretty much most of them here on the screen are. So with that, if you see it or you even think that you might have it, you are required by law to notify us, and we need to know about it so we can get out and do an investigation if need be, or handle that case appropriately. So not to take up more time, I'll end there, and I'll turn it back over to you, Justine.
Andy, thanks.
Dr. Hawkins.
Yeah, go ahead, Janelle.
Yeah, we really appreciate all that up-to-date information happening there on VSV, and we'll make sure and share that out to all of our participants today if there's anything they're needing to learn. And now we're going to have Michelle White, who's the director of Bar-K Bar Arena and Celebration Center in Lyons, Kansas. Michelle's also the KHC venue liaison and brings information about equine events and the impact they make on a community. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. As you said, I'm the marketing director at the Bar-K Bar Arena in Lyons, Kansas. We're a small community right in the middle of Kansas. We have the event venue with an indoor arena, an outdoor arena, have about 150 stalls. So we are a smaller community with about 3,700 people and a county population of about 9,500. This facility is privately owned. We don't have any city, county, or state funding to support this. And the COVID-19 and the VSV impact has been huge, not only on a facility, but also on our community. First off, we were considered unessential. We considered kind of a community center. So first thing, right off the bat, we were shut down. And we also have a front event facility that also does weddings and that type of thing. So we've been completely shut down since March 18th. We are following both state and local guidelines. For liability purposes, we have to make sure we follow the rules. And that started out with gathering limitations and then travel restrictions. Our county kept a pretty strict travel restriction. And with probably 95% of our participants in events here coming from outside of our county and outside of the state, that eliminated almost all of our events. And then with the VSV, we're also working closely with our local veterinarians. While we can do the inspections and everything upon arrival, which is our current requirement, we also need to protect our community from both the COVID and the VSV. So we're being very careful. As far as the impact of all of this, event venues like this are typically not profitable. That's just kind of a well-known fact. But our deficit year to date is double what it was at this point in 2019. But the worst impact is the effect on the community. With all of the closings and everything that happens to all of our businesses, to even begin to calculate the impact of that, let alone the loss of revenue for them from events not happening here. I actually did my own event survey and data collection that I felt better reflected the events and the attendees from Kansas. And according to my calculations, we would have had 684 horses here since closure. And this is including some of the cancellations, because I've had cancellations clear into October, November, December. People are just being careful and not ready to go out yet. With 40 nights worth of overnight stays that would have been in our community. And with that, we would have had 90% of those people eat out, and that would have been about $735,000. 29% of those people would have stayed in motels, and that's about $450,000. And about 88% of them would be buying fuel, so that's about $26,000. So the initial impact to our community was $1.2 million. And they consider that income into your community cycles twice. So times two, that's a $2.4 million loss to our community, and that doesn't even count my revenue loss. So it was a very substantial impact to our community, and definitely looking forward to a point that we can have people welcome here to our community again and ready to come back in and have our events going again. Comparatively, the reason I did my own impact study was I didn't feel like the Quarter Horse Association, there's several groups that have done impact calculations, but comparing to the American Quarter Horse calculation, those same numbers of animals coming in, they would have said a $24 million impact. I didn't feel like that was relevant to Kansas, to our smaller community, to our event venues that have 150 to 300 stalls and are just typically doing 4 or 5 day shows instead of the much larger month-long shows. So that's why I used my own calculations on that.
Great. Well, thank you, Michelle, for that look at the economic impact that's happening there for your community and your arena specifically. Now we're going to have an update from Linda Landerman, who's the director of our state parks in Kansas. Linda?
Thank you so much. I've got to say, Dan, during this pandemic, I've watched more Gunsmoke and Matt Dillon just in an effort to not watch the same old movies all the time. So thank you for having me today. Kansas State Parks has gone through 2 years of significant challenges. Last year, if you recall, we were flooded out. The rain started in April. April, May, June was tough days for us. Our revenue that we lost during that time was little over about $1.5 million, and our cabin account also reduced revenues. We did have over $10 million in damage at our state parks, and that is roads and riprap around some of the areas, but mainly it's our trail systems, which some of them are open now again, but we still have significant damage. The state legislature gave us $2 million last year to help us with FEMA match, which we are going to apply for FEMA to help us with some of these damages. However, then we come into this year, and we didn't know at first what it was going to be like. When you have a pandemic, the first thing you think is that you're going to not have anybody in your parks again. And it turned out to be the opposite. So we have people that, in essence, just love us to death. We've seen a significant uptick in motorboat use, equestrian use, hiking and biking, fishing, and so camping, significant number of new campers. And so was just the opposite. We were allowed to stay open, which I felt like was a silver lining for those that can get out and use our facilities and still social distance. With that, we ended the year this last July, so end of June, we ended an increase and really pretty much gained what we lost last year. However, we've spent a lot of money. So with those expenditures and with people coming in, our increases in utilities was pretty significant, and we're still spending to fix our damages. And so our cash flow is not where it needs to be. And in a state park system that's funded only through your fee funds, we do get a little bit of EDIF, but it's going to be a challenge still throughout this year. Our hope is that we'll be able to get some reimbursements back through FEMA if they approve some of these projects that we have already fixed. I will tell you, we've had some good things happen. In June, we went ahead and had the Best of America by horseback. Justine and the Backcountry Horsemen, the Horse Council was there. It turned out to be a very good day. I thought the whole weekend was encouraging, and just to get to visit with equestrian users and what our facilities, how they use our facilities and what's needed. And so that was a good time. We also, I noticed that Sue, I listened to your presentation on economic impact. We are doing an economic impact study right now for Kansas State Parks. And so I would be curious to see what your study is for the equestrian, and we can actually, I'll get with Justine and try to get some questions in there before we send that study out. That would be something also that we should look at. And I think our goal is, just like Sue said in North Carolina, is how do people use our facilities, and what else could we do, and what does the impact to the state? How is that impact? And I think that's something we've never had for a long, long time in Kansas State Parks. So I'm anxious to get that out. We also are doing a study for our SCORT plan, and that's our strategic outdoor plan that we have to have for the Land and Water Conservation Fund program that was just voted in the House today, or it was heard today. It already passed in the Senate, and we received quite a bit of funding for our state parks and local parks. So that's significant for us also. I also listened to Dr. Hawkins, and something we've never done in Kansas State Parks before, and that is to check the certificate in the health of equestrian users when they come in. I throw that out there because it's been a concern, especially since I went up to Eisenhower to the Best of America, and some of the riders from Butler County did not come because of that virus. So that is something I know other states do. And Justine, I'd like to get with you and your team and see if that's something that we should implement to make sure that those users that are out there have a safe environment for their horses also. Visitation, I will say, is up too. We're about 500,000 higher than what we were a year ago. And so I have a tired team. We're in July, but I can tell they're tired. They've been working through the pandemic, and but this is what you live for as a state park system. You would much rather have people in your state parks enjoying them than not having anybody in there. And so we'll get through it. I expect the fall to be as busy, and maybe even more so on the equestrian side. As it cools down. And I think our goal is continually to be a partner with our equestrian users and to make sure that we are providing as much as we possibly can and educating other users so they will be courteous to our equestrian users. So I too will take questions if you have any. I think that is pretty much everything that I thought I'd present today, Justine.
Hey, thanks, Linda. We're super excited to hear that folks are out visiting our great state parks. And there is a question for you. The question is, do you have any suggestions on how the Kansas Horse Council and anyone listening today can help drive more equestrians to our state parks? Are there special events or something?
We can have special events. You need to talk to those local managers. So we have 28 state parks, but 9 of them have equestrian campgrounds. And so we could not do those special events without the volunteer groups, and that's those equestrian users. My goodness, they've had work days at Canopolis and at Perry. We have significant improvements at Perry, I think you'll see, and at Hillsdale. And we can do those events. They just need to contact us. We will social distance, and we will wear our mask. So till we get through this pandemic, that's how we'll handle it.
Thanks, Linda. That was really great information for everybody.
Thank you.
So now we're going to hear some quick updates on the event expo infrastructures in Kansas to include the American Royal, Kansas State Fair, and the Stormont Vale Event Center. So we'll start with Dr. McClaskey from the American Royal.
Thanks, Janelle. Happy to be here and happy to give you all a quick update on the Royal. For those of you who've followed the project, you already know part of this, but we are building a 1 million+ square foot facility north of the Kansas Speedway in Wyandotte County as a home for the new American Royal. Since this time last year, since last year's summit, we have secured the ground on which the primary event center will be located, which was 80 acres. We already had 47 acres secured. And in fact, this May, we added another 77 acres that will be used for outdoor festival grounds. And where this group might be specifically interested is, as we work to design that ground, there's been a lot of discussion of things like horse trails, riding trails through that area. So we hope to actually utilize that ground to even increase the number of equine events we could do on site. This spring, we went through the unified government local planning process, and our preliminary plans and then our final plans were approved. The final plan was approved in late April, which lays out our design as, everything from site work to where the doors are to thinking about how how we interact with infrastructure, all of those pieces. About that time was when, the we had really started to shut down societally, and we put a pause on our design build efforts once we got through the Wyandotte County approval process, just to let us wait out the COVID period for a little bit. We are continuing to plan. We're still working on design. We're talking to folks who want to be in the facility, and we are planning our fundraising strategy. And as we see relief start to come, we will kick back into our fundraising and move towards setting an official groundbreaking date. But if you are in the area, there are big signs up now, so you can drive north of the Speedway and see big wooden signs that say Home of the Royal. And hopefully by the end of the year or early in 2021, you'll start to see dirt move.
Excellent. Thanks for that update, Jackie. We are looking forward to a date being named so we can come for a groundbreaking sometime. So David Tobias from Kansas State Fair is unfortunately not able to join us today, but he did send over a couple of thoughts to give you on the latest things with State Fair. So I'll read this selection he gave us. The COVID pandemic has been tough on all fairs around the US and will continue to impact what we do and the decisions we make on a daily basis at the Kansas State Fair. By not having the fair, we now have a great revenue shortfall that will greatly impact not only our budget, but Reno County and the state of Kansas. The Kansas State Fair has decided that all major renovation projects need to be placed on hold. Staff is working hard looking into all opportunities for revenue. We had asphalt patching and replacement projects lined up to get done before the 2020 fair. We had budgeted $125,000 each year for the repair and replacement of asphalt. This had to be put on hold due to the pandemic. The expo renovation has also been put on hold indefinitely due to the pandemic. This project was scheduled to begin directly after the 2020 fair. With the uncertainty of what the future holds, the Kansas State Fair needs to scale back as much as possible to preserve the funds that we do have. Since we do run on a fiscal year from July 1st to June 30th, the sales tax that we have brought in from the fair last fiscal year was $320,000. Without having a fair, there will be a considerable shortfall in the capital improvement fund, as the sales tax that we normally generate will be minimal this year. We are considering smaller events that we could possibly have on the fairgrounds during the non-fair period to generate some additional revenue. Please follow the fair on our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, social media pages, as well on kansasstatefair.com. That's all that I can tell you right now, but I'm always open to answer any questions. So if you do have any questions, feel free to put them into our chat box or the question area, and we will reach out to David and get those answered for you and sent your way. Now we'll move over to Hope Hall, and so she can give us an update of what's happening in Topeka.
Well, we just had our first horse show this past weekend. It was a 4-H show, and so now we're off and running. We've got a full schedule going up until November. And as long as there's no shutdowns with the COVID and the VSV stays away, we should be good there. But during our shutdown period, we actually got a lot of work accomplished that we had scheduled for the next year and a half. So over the past few months, we have done some renovations with Dormer Arena. We have fully enclosed our warm-up area. We've installed fans in the warm-up area. In the stall barn, we've installed 6 fans there, and we also have fans inside the Dormer Arena now, so it's much cooler in there. Every row of the stall barn now has water to it, so you don't have to slip buckets from one end to the other end. It's all right there. We've renovated the wash racks. We've upgraded the lighting in the arena is now LED lighting, and it's all on separate light switches, so we can raise it, lower it, however you want to do it. So that's kind of exciting. We've upgraded the cafe and the restrooms. We've added some new trailer parking. We've redone some of the parking lots. We've resurfaced all of our parking lots, so there's no more big holes. We've redone the trailer hookups for the RV spaces and everything. They all have water to them now. We've even added more of the 50 amp hookups. We have new on-site lighting, so it's much brighter out in the parking lot. We have put in new drop-off lanes on the west side of the building that have sidewalks on both sides so that you can drive up, unload your horses, haul your stuff in, and then go park your trailer, and you don't have to move stuff from quite a distance anymore. Later this year, we still have some more renovations to do. Later this year, we're going to be swapping out some of our older stalls and putting in new stalls So it'll be about 100 new stalls that are going in. We're going to level the stall barns while we have all the stalls pulled out of there. And then they're also putting in more drop-down electricity so that there'll be one electrical outlet for every couple of stalls. So there'll be a lot more of that available as well. So pretty exciting stuff going on around here. At least there was something positive coming out of the COVID.
Well, we're happy you were able to get those updates made, and we look forward to some more shows happening there. And we actually did have a question pop up for Dr. McClaskey with American Royal. We had Sherry wanting to know, what is the equine RV parks plan at American Royal?
So right now, I mentioned that we have kind of three sections. I mean, they're bigger than sections, but 3 land areas. 80 acres where the main facility will be. Across 118th is 47 acres. And then right next to that 47 is the 77. Before we purchased the 77 acres, the 47 acres was designated for RV and trailer parking. Now that we've purchased that additional 77, we're going to rethink that configuration a little bit, and we'll be able to fit a lot more RVs than we did previously, and we'll work through where those will fit. But they're going to be right there on the property, that we own and control. So we feel like that's going to give people really good access.
Excellent. Thanks for that update. And Hope, we actually just had a question come in for you wanting to know, how is the security being addressed at the Dome or arena?
So we have a security person on staff throughout the night. So it's a little easier now because we can actually lock down the building if we need to. And then we have, like I said, we have the security overnight, and then we also have extra staff on as we need it. If we have some of the bigger shows, or if there's some concerns with some of the shows, we can always add on more security staff to be there throughout the night.
Great, thank you. So now that we've heard updates and information from all of our speakers, and hopefully you've gotten your questions answered, and there's a few that I know that are still there in the answer area, and we'll work with those speakers and get those out to you. We're gonna actually bring that poll back up again that we showed at the very beginning, and have you re-vote after you've heard all these speakers to see if these are the same topics that you still thought were really important, or if you've kind of changed your vote. So as that poll comes up, we'll do another quick minute. If you want to vote, we'll see what we want to move forward with for this next year. Okay, I'll give you everyone about 20 more seconds to answer here. You can just wrap up those last votes, folks. Okay, let's see. It looks like our #1 is having an equine expo infrastructure as destination for world level shows supporting regional level and local equine events is #1. And then right behind it, and we actually have 2 tied for those spots, we have obtaining an equine survey to assessing economic impact, and then defining horses as livestock for all state departments to recognize in statute interpretations. So we kind of know where you want us to work on and what you want us to do for the next year. So thank you so much today for your participation in our equine sector session. A recording of the webinar will be posted on www.agriculture.ks.gov summit in the next week. But please remember to join us for the crossover sessions on August 17th, 18th, and 19th, and on Thursday, August 20th for the main Agro Summit webinar, where we will hear from guest speakers and share highlights from the sector and crossover sessions. The Kansas Department of Agriculture is now accepting nominations for the first ever Kansas Agricultural Heroes program. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, Kansas farmers, ranchers, and agribusinesses have performed essential functions to keep food on the tables of the people worldwide. KDA established this program as a way to recognize those in agriculture industry who went above and beyond to serve others and better their community when it was needed most. You're encouraged to nominate any individual, family, or business in Kansas agricultural you feel provided a notable contribution to the agricultural industry or their community as a whole this year. The nomination period is currently open and will close on August 10th. The nomination instructions can be found at www.agriculture.ks.gov/summit. Thank you again for your participation. Have a great rest of your day and watch for an email from us with recaps. Thanks.